those 2 days.
Okay. I promised you, and I lied, that you weren't going to hear from me the rest of the day. We are at the end of the day, and I just wanted to recap. I'm not going to write any code. I'm not going to use my screen.
Oh, man.
I wanted to help you understand what we did today, or what we tried to do. And we got almost there. If you got all the way through it, great. If you didn't, this is something that you can go back and look at the code and make it work and bring it in later. This is something we're not going to revisit Node.js probably unless you choose Node.js as the middleware tier that you want to use for your final project. If you want to do JavaScript for your middleware tier as your final project, more power to you. We're going to help you make it work. You have a choice. What did we do? This is the first time we saw a full stack application start to finish using the skills that you've learned. It's not easy. This is why a lot of classes don't even attempt it. There's way too much. And they kept telling me, don't even try it. I said, we have to do it because that's what we do as a consulting company. So give yourself a break. I've told some of you privately, don't be hard on yourself. If you didn't get there, hopefully we've given you enough information, we've explained how to get over the roadblocks so that you can continue on and make it work on your own this evening or during the July 4th break week or this weekend. If you get stuck, come back and ask questions. We will help you get it working. It's important that you understand not specifically Node.js, not specifically I need to understand why this jQuery is doing that with the post versus the get. That's not important. What is important, what I want you to take home today with you, is understand what you just did or what you're trying to do if you haven't got it working yet. You've got a user interface. What are the languages you use in the user interface? HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. JavaScript, normally it's jQuery in the user interface because you're dealing with the HTML elements. The next tier, what did we learn today? We learned a whole technology in the middle tier and a new database to boot, which is, we learned a non-relational database in the top tier, and the brand name was MongoDB. Others work almost identically to this non-relational database. That wasn't enough. We piled on, and we said, oh, what about all that SQL stuff? Let's do that with relational too. So we said, okay, you've learned SQL. This is how you connect the back to the middle to the front. And I did that this afternoon. MongoDB was the back with non-relational to the middle to the front. The same middle. Node.js for the middle, for both of them. What is Node.js? What language?
JavaScript.
It's just JavaScript. What's the big difference between Node.js and the front-end jQuery JavaScript you write? There's no user interface. You got to actually just write the JavaScript. What's a web server used for? What is a web server's purpose in life? All it does, all day long.
Get this stuff off your computer to other people, right?
It's supposed to stay on your computer. It's like the ferry.
Somebody said it's the ferry. I was expecting some wrong answers. I didn't expect that one.
Like the ferry boat that takes it from one end.
Oh, ferry.
Not like Tinkerbell. Okay.
It acts as a
It's
traffic cop and provides the framework for
the ferry, like the waterborne ferry. Okay. Okay. I'm with you, Scott. Yeah. So it ferries. What does it ferry? Let's use that metaphor. It ferries information. So normally, let's use the metaphor of a ferry. The ferry is sitting at the dock all day long. That is a web server's purpose in life. It sits and it listens, and it listens, and it listens, and it waits for somebody to show up at the dock. And when somebody shows up at the dock, what is that? That's a web request. That's a get, put, post, or delete on a certain URL. And it says, oh, somebody's coming over. Where do you want to go? I'm going to go to that port, or I'm going to go to that port. That's your route. So the ferry is going to take you wherever you want to go. So the ferry is the web server, and this is kind of where the metaphor breaks down. On the other side of that ferry, you're ferrying across the river, the other port, you might find a different civilization at that port versus this port. Okay? So say you're going from Barcelona, and you're going to go to Isle of Man, or you're going to go someplace in, say, Sicily. you're going to find two completely different languages. To use the metaphor, the end of your route, what happens? You write the code that decides what happens at the end of the route. You could, as we did today, query a database, get some data, give the data back as part of the request. So I'm trying to review the basic concepts. So I'm going to put the ferry metaphor aside. But we get the data from the database from a route, which is just a function in JavaScript and Node.js. And then how do we give it back a web page? Could we just send a file, to your point? We could just send a file back. That's called a static file. Yeah, there you go, browser. Here's a file. You could also have a dynamic file generated that is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. What are those called? It's a template, but what's the technical term called? It's a view. It's a view, and it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but you can inject some variables in it. You can inject your data into it. So by the time the web browser gets it, what does the web browser do? It gets this big mess of text, which is HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and it renders it. That's what web browsers do. So somebody said, what does Node.js do? It makes it look pretty? No, that's wrong. Node.js is not pretty. Node.js only talks about text. It doesn't even know how to make things pretty. It just gives you the files. It's the web browser's job that makes things look pretty. The web browser renders that text into something that looks human readable. The nuance here is JavaScript on the client, JavaScript on the server. What runs JavaScript on the client?
The browser.
The browser. What runs JavaScript on the server? Node. Node. That's a very, very quick recap. I don't expect you to understand everything on the first pass, which is what we did today. We kind of jumped from, we're about halfway through, you're kind of hanging on. We ran all the way to the end of the course today, okay? If you were going to be a Node.js developer, you are a full-stack Node.js developer. Fortunately, we have several weeks to go. So what are you going to hear from here on out? You're not going to hear it from me. You're going to hear it from other developers, and they're going to tell you the same thing. Paul Taylor, Derek, they're going to come back. Paul Taylor's going to teach you how to do this same thing, same concepts, with a different technology called Angular in TypeScript. Derek's going to come back starting tomorrow, and he's going to teach you how to do this with C#. So you're going to learn the same thing, but I need you to go home thinking, you know, Node.js maybe left a bad taste in your mouth. Understand where it fits in the stack and what you did today, because you can do that in several different technologies. That's what you need to take home with you, and try to get it working. If you can't, come back to us. Also, this is the last day that I'm going to be the primary instructor, maybe for the rest of the course. I'll be around to answer questions and interject once in a while. But if you have questions of me, just ask. But I'm not going to be your primary from now on. So, any other questions before we go?
Real quick, how do you stop? It's like still running.
How do you, yeah, a web server's purpose of life is to sit there and run all the time. How do you kill it? Control-C. Control-C. And by the way, if you had a node server running and you made changes to your code and saved them, they're not going to show up until you kill it and restart it. Any other questions? Good. Think about what we learned today. Sure.
So would you say using C# is better?
No.
Like, which one would you suggest to you?